This information is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. It is offered with the understanding that the presenters are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If legal advice or other expert advice is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought.
Well, good morning and welcome everyone. I'm James Orr, and this is a presentation for the Northern Colorado Real Estate Investor Group. It is the second part in the series on finding deals on Craigslist. This one is how to find deals on Craigslist, part 2, replying to for sale by owner ads. So let's jump right into the presentation. We got quite a bit to cover, and I wanted to get this out to you guys before the meeting tonight. Today is August 14th, 2012. And so we have a Northern Colorado Real Estate Investor meeting tonight. Wanted to do this recording before the meeting and then handle a live Q&A and implement this strategy for you tonight at the meeting. So like I mentioned before, this is part 2 in the series of how to find deals on Craigslist. Last month, on July 10th, we covered part 1, which was posting ads on Craigslist in order to find deals. That's where you actually post up your own ad and try to get sellers in order to inquire on those ads with properties that they have for sale. This one, part 2, is about replying to specifically for sale by owner ads, people that are selling their property by themselves without a real estate agent. And we'll be covering how to reply to those ads that other sellers are posting in order to find potential properties for you to buy as a real estate investor. Next month, we have part 3 in the series. Part 3 in the series is replying to for rent ads. And we'll be covering that on September 11th, 2012. So this is part 2. Part 3 will be next month, and you can access part 1 already on jamesorr.com. I believe it is in the special reports section. So if you go to the website, look for the special reports link at the top, and there should be a link directly to this, and you can go ahead and download it or watch the video. Speaking of which, this presentation is going to be in 2 formats. So I am recording a video version using PowerPoint where you'll be able to see the slides and look at things. But then also, when I'm done recording it on PowerPoint, I rip out the audio so that you can download and listen to just the audio. I would say 99% of this entire presentation you do not need the slides for. So there's very little that you'll need to see or read on the slides. Most of it you can get from the audio. Some people prefer to watch video though, and so I do make the video available for you to use on the website. Just go to jamesorr.com. There should be a YouTube video on there for the video version, or you can go to the website and download the MP3 audio version, burn it to CD, put it onto your iPhone or iPod or whatever else you're listening to MP3s on, and you can listen to it in either format, an audio format like you can listen to in your car on a hike or something like that, or video version where you're listening to it on the website and you're able to see the PowerPoint slides. So it's there for your convenience. I do it in both formats for you, so go ahead and use those, and whatever is best for you. Alright, so let's talk about the objectives of what we plan to cover tonight at the meeting and what I'm covering right now this morning. So number 1 is we'd like to learn why we'd want to reply to for sale by owner ads on Craigslist as a real estate investor and real estate entrepreneur at all. I mean, what's the appeal? Why would we even want to go and take the time to go through each one of the ads that are posted to Craigslist to see if we can find a particular deal? You know, besides the obvious one of, you know, we're buying properties to make money. So we'll cover some of the reasons why we'd want to focus on replying to for sale by owner ads on Craigslist. Then we're going to go over some of the Craigslist basics. In the previous video on how to post ads, I covered some of the Craigslist basics, and I focused on the basics related to posting ads. In this particular video, I'm going to focus on some of the Craigslist basics, but I'm also going to be focusing more on replying to ads, that part of the process. And then the last thing is I'm going to show you how to reply to for sale by owner ads on Craigslist in order to find deals. I have some systems in place for doing that, which may prove to be helpful for you. It's not just okay, go through all the ads on Craigslist, and you know, if you're interested, go ahead and reply. I've got some systems in place that kind of make it a little bit easier to do it. Although what I just described, going through each ad and replying, is basically how it is. So I do have some systems to make it easier, and I'll share those with you today as well. All right, so let's talk first about some of the major areas or ways to find sellers and potential deals as a real estate investor. And in my opinion, there are three major areas that you want to focus on when looking for deals. And I'm kind of oversimplifying, but they really are, number one, the multiple listing service. So when a seller is interested in selling a property, a good percentage of them are going to go to a real estate agent and list their property for sale. And that real estate agent is going to post that particular property for sale in the multiple listing service to maximize their exposure and allow other real estate agents in the market to bring their buyers by and try to sell that property. So the MLS is a major area. I'm often surprised by how many real estate investors do not use the MLS in order to sell their properties. I think that's a mistake. I think that you can find ways in order to get your property into the MLS and increase the marketing exposure of your property. So if you are a real estate investor, you may want to even look at, and you're not using the MLS, you may want to look at ways to use the MLS in order to increase your exposure. Another way is the for sale by owner. When you decide to not use a real estate agent and put your property into the MLS, you would then sell your property for sale by owner. That's what we're primarily talking about today. A lot of the for sale by owners are going to go to real estate websites. They're going to put a sign in their yard. They'll put an ad in the paper if they don't know that the paper is not nearly as effective as it once was in order to sell properties. So most of them though are going to put their property for sale on websites like Craigslist. And so for sale by owners, what we're primarily talking about today as the second way or second major area in order to find sellers. So for sale by owners, what we're covering in today's presentation. Next month, we're covering for rent. So if you're looking for a property to buy, sometimes a seller is only renting their property because they feel or they were not successful in selling their property. And this is more common than you might imagine, but imagine a seller who has a mortgage payment. They cannot afford to have their property sit vacant for a period of time. They've been transferred out of the area, or they've been split up with their spouse and they're looking to sell their property, and they decide, something, the market's kind of rough right now, or the market's a little slow right now. Why don't we go ahead and put our property up for rent? We'll rent it out for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then at the end of that time period, then we'll go ahead and sell the property, and we'll do it that way. The only reason they're really renting is because they feel as though they cannot sell the property. And so finding a seller, someone who is looking to sell their property in the for rent section, is actually more common than you'd imagine. So, and it's especially helpful when you think about what somebody in the for rent section has said. What they've basically said is that we are okay accepting payments for a period of time. So that to me tells me that they might be willing to do some type of either short-term or long-term creative financing, like owner financing or a lease option or lease purchase. And so for rent, when we cover that next month, we're going to be focusing a lot more on some of these strategies where monthly payments are a big issue. So asking the seller to carry back for a period of time, or asking the seller to do a lease purchase or rent to own. And so we'll talk about those next month. But the one we're going to be talking about today is for sale by owners. So MLS, for sale by owner, and for rent are the three major areas in order to find sellers. I will tell you this: if you're looking to find deals, usually your real estate agent, if they're doing a good job, are going to be covering the multiple listing service for you. So you can assume that your real estate agent has a good cover on the MLS. You'll have to analyze the properties they're sending over, but they should have a pretty thorough coverage of the properties coming up for sale there. The for sale by owner section, though, in the for rent section, most real estate agents are not going to be covering that for you. They're not going to be scouring Craigslist and finding deals and bringing them to your attention. So that is something you'll need to step up and do as a real estate investor. That's why we're covering this system today. So this is why you want to do it. This is why you're going to need to do it. But let's talk about why you should want to do it in the next slide. All right, so why should we even bother looking at for sale by owner properties? Well, first reason is there are a percentage of properties that are for sale by owner, not in the MLS, where the seller is selling it at a pretty significant discount and you could buy it for cash. So that's reason number one. But probably a more compelling reason for a lot of real estate entrepreneurs is the ability to deal directly with the seller and negotiate creative terms on the property. For example, on the screen, if you're watching the video, I've got listed up my 6 creative ways in order to buy real estate. This is a kind of framework I use in my mind to think about the different ways that you can buy homes creatively, non-traditionally, not cash or traditional financing. And so these are much more available to you to negotiate directly with the seller than trying to negotiate inside the MLS through your agent to another agent to the seller. So if you're going to try to ask a property that's for sale in the multiple listing service if they'd consider owner financing, you're basically asking your agent to go ask another agent to ask their seller if they'd consider owner financing. Oftentimes, if your agent or the seller's agent or the seller are not inclined to think about owner financing, they're not pro-owner financing, then it's going to be a hard time to convince them. When you are dealing directly with the seller, in the case of a for sale by owner, you're contacting the seller directly, you can make your best case for owner financing. You could present it the way that makes sense for you, and we'll talk a little bit about how to kind of start those conversations with some example emails later on in this presentation, but you have your best chance of finding sellers that would possibly consider owner financing and the other 6 different ways to buy creatively. So let me cover what those are in case you've never heard me talk about the 6 different ways to buy creatively. And I do have some other videos on my website about buying creatively using some of these strategies. It's mostly for owner occupants, the videos on my website, but I do help my real estate investor clients do this. It's one of the services I offer. So if you're looking to do this, you can go and study it on your own and do it yourself. But one of the things that I do as a real estate broker is I can help my clients find these particular types of creative transactions as well. So what are they? Number one, owner financing. Owner financing, my definition, is when the seller acts like the bank and they carry back financing. They accept monthly payments, usually monthly payments. It doesn't have to be monthly payments. It could be quarterly payments or yearly payments or twice a year payments. But basically the seller is acting like the bank and they're accepting payments on their property, and you get ownership. You get the deed. Okay. Usually there's a deed of trust and a note, and they're accepting payments on it. My definition of owner financing is that the property that the seller owns must be free and clear. They cannot have a mortgage on it. If they have a mortgage on it and they're actually going to offer owner financing, it becomes wrap financing. Wrap financing is just like owner financing, except the seller still has a mortgage on it. It's usually a relatively small mortgage. So in an example, seller owns a property worth $200,000. They still owe $50,000 on the mortgage. They've had the mortgage for a while, and they decide that they're willing to accept owner financing. They're willing to accept payments from you, and part of the payment is going to be used to pay what they still owe, the $50,000, with whatever those payments work out to be, $300 a month or whatever it is. And then the rest of it, the difference between what you're paying them totally, they get to keep. So they're going to wrap their underlying note on the property. And so that's wrap financing, when a seller has an underlying note on the property and they're accepting payments. So owner financing, free and clear. Wrap financing, they still have a mortgage. What about if the seller has a loan that is assumable? With interest rates that have been going down for the last 5 years or so, maybe actually more than that, since probably 2004, we've been seeing some pretty significant declines. But if you've seen interest rates coming down over time, the idea or the desire to do a loan assumption has been not so strong. But now that we have interest rates that have been really low for a while, lots of people have gotten these really low interest rate loans. As interest rates start to climb, the concept of coming in and assuming a loan at 4%, 4.5%, 5%, starting to make payments on that when interest rates are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they've been higher than that in the past, in recent past, past 30 years, that's going to become very attractive. So your ability to go and talk directly with the seller and say, hey, I notice you have an assumable FHA loan on here. Would you consider having me formally assume the loan, and I could pay you X number of dollars towards your equity, and I'll just take over payments on your loan? Maybe you'll combine that with a little bit of financing in second position to the seller, where you'll pay them $100 a month on their equity until everything's paid off, above and beyond what the loan you're taking over is. So it could be very good, creative way for you to acquire very low interest rate loans by formally going into the bank and getting permission from them and applying and paying the fee in order to formally assume the loan. That's loan assumption. That's the third one. So we have owner financing number 1, wrap financing number 2, loan assumption number 3. The fourth group of creative financing is the rent-to-own, lease-to-own, lease option, lease purchase family. I kind of group these together. There are some subtle differences between them, but they're all basically the same idea, and that is you're going to be renting the property for a period of time, and then you have the ability to purchase the property at some point in the future. Whether that's an option agreement or whether that's a purchase contract determines whether it's a lease option or a lease purchase. Rent-to-own and lease-to-own are generic ways of describing both of those. There's no rent-to-own does not necessarily mean lease option or lease purchase. It's just the generic way of saying I'm going to be renting the property and at some point in the future I'm going to be owning it, or I'm going to be leasing the property and at some point in the future I'm going to be owning it. And lease option or lease purchase is the more technical way of describing that, although a lot of people use those interchangeably incorrectly. So they will say lease option when they really mean a lease with a purchase contract, which is not right, or they'll use lease purchase when they really mean a lease with an option agreement, which is also not right. So to be more technically correct, you should use lease option when you're talking about a lease with an option, and lease purchase when you're talking about a lease with a purchase contract. All right, that was a mouthful. So that is number 4. That's group number 4, the rent-to-own, lease-to-own, lease option, lease purchase family. Those are especially hard to do inside the MLS. Owner financing, wrap financing, you can actually search inside the MLS and find those, but they're relatively straightforward because real estate agents can see how they're going to get paid a commission. With owner financing, there's actually a closing, and with wrap financing and loan assumption, there are closings on those where the real estate commission is triggered. So a real estate agent is, okay with trying to find those deals because they know how they're going to get paid. With a rent-to-own, lease-to-own, lease option, lease purchase, it's much more complicated because there is not a sale up front. The seller, rightfully so, thinks that there is actually not a purchase, there's not a closing for the rental part of the rent-to-own or lease option, lease purchase, and so there is no commission due. So real estate agents get really frustrated because somebody wants to do a rent-to-own, lease option, lease purchase, and there's no way for them to get paid a commission, at least until usually 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, when the purchase part of the lease option, lease purchase comes in and there actually is a closing on the property. So a real estate agent does all this work, puts you into a rent-to-own, negotiates the contracts, does all the paperwork. Actually, the attorney should do all the paperwork, but basically they find you the deal, negotiate the deal back and forth with the seller and you, and then you go and you start renting the property, but a commission is not due until 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, and a good percentage of these rent-to-own, lease option, lease purchases are never closed on. Depending on what numbers you're looking at, 1 out of 3 closing is probably a pretty good ratio to use. So they may have to go through 3 of these lease option, lease purchases, do the work of finding these properties and negotiating rather challenging types of transactions and convince another agent oftentimes in the MLS to go along with it. And neither of the agents are getting paid. So a lot of times real estate agents will not do rent-to-own, lease-to-own, lease option, lease purchase transactions. However, going directly to the seller on Craigslist, and we'll talk a lot about this next month when we talk about contacting for rent ads, because a lease option, lease purchase is really easy to do. Well, I shouldn't say really easy, but much easier to do when somebody's already agreed to rent their property. Trying to contact somebody who has a property for sale and asking if they do a lease option or lease purchase is one conversation. Asking somebody who has a property already for rent if they do a lease option or lease purchase, very different conversation. But you can go ahead and use the for sale by owners in order to find these because you're dealing directly with the seller. And since there's no real estate agent involved in most cases, I mean, for me and my clients there is, but if you're doing this on your own outside of me, you can go ahead and talk directly to the seller, and the commission is not an issue. Because the seller is not paying a commission, you're not paying a commission, you're basically trying to do the transaction directly with them, and you can negotiate that directly. Okay, so owner financing number 1, wrap financing number 2, loan assumption number 3, number 4, rent-to-own, lease-to-own, lease option, lease purchase family of kind of transactions. The 5th group is the installment land contract. In other states, they call them agreement for deed, bond for deed, contract for deed. But it's basically the way that I like to describe it is if you've ever bought a car and you've agreed to make payments to the car, and then at the end of your agreement, the end of your payments, they decide to give you title to the car. That's what the installment land contract is sort of like for houses. So with owner financing and wrap financing, you actually get the deed up front. You are the owner of the property, and the seller has security, or the lender in this case, because they become a lender, they have security on the property with a note and deed of trust. When you do an installment land contract, you do not get title. You are not technically on title for the property. You are agreeing to make payments over time, and then once you're done with your payments, you get title to the property. So it's kind of like an installment sale. You make so many payments for so long a period of time, and then at the end of that, then you get ownership. That's what an installment land contract is. And you can negotiate those directly with the seller. Those would be okay inside the MLS. In fact, you can go ahead and try to find installment land contract situations there. And a lot of times you can negotiate a commission on those. But it's much more likely that you'll be able to negotiate them directly if you're outside the MLS and dealing directly with the seller. The last group, we've already covered the 5 creative ways. The number 6 way is subject to. Buying a property subject to the existing financing that's on the property. The example I'd like to use with this, by the way, this is by far the most controversial of all the group. Okay, you are agreeing to have the seller transfer title of the property to you and leaving their existing financing in place. Okay, so most controversial. Some attorneys will tell you don't touch these. Some attorneys say, yeah, they're fine, do them all the time. Okay, so depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. Certain people think they're fine. Other people think that they're not something you should do. So definitely talk to your own counsel and find out how to do it. But the basic idea is this: you have a seller. The seller is had a house or has a house, and they are in a situation where something happens to them. Maybe they have a job loss, or they're being transferred, or they have a divorce situation, and they can no longer afford their property. This is just one example, but I'm going to explain to you how it works. So the seller decides, I can't afford my property anymore. Forget this. I'm actually going to go move. I'm going to go move back in with my parents in Florida, and I'm done. I'm going to let the bank come in and foreclose on the property and give it back to them. And you, as the buyer, say, wait a minute, not so fast, Mr. Seller. I'll tell you what. Instead of you going and giving this property back to the bank and having a foreclosure on your record, what if I could come in, I'll start making the payments that you were making to the bank, and you transfer ownership of the property to me. I become the owner. You don't have to have a foreclosure on your record. I'll start making payments directly to the bank, and we'll just leave the loan in place. That's what buying subject to the existing financing is in a very brief overview. And I cover this a lot more in some other places, but that's basically the idea. So you find a seller who has a situation where you coming in and starting to make payments on their existing loan makes sense. It's a win-win. And so they transfer title. Well, actually, you have an attorney do this. Don't do it yourself. But you have an attorney draft up paperwork so that they transfer title of the property, and then you start making payments on that underlying loan. And yes, there's some weird things with it. I'm not going to go into details in this particular presentation, but if you are interested in that, you should do some research on it. Definitely talk to your attorney about it too. So those are the 6 different ways for buying creatively, and why you want to go and contact sellers on Craigslist directly instead of trying to negotiate some of these through real estate agents. Because trying to get a real estate agent to do creative things like rent to own or subject to or wrap financing or installment land contracts or loan assumptions is usually more challenging. You're going to have much better luck finding a seller directly, going and meeting with the seller, finding out more about their situation, knowing kind of your situation, and seeing if there might be a good win-win solution for their particular sales situation. Is it in their best interest to maybe do at least option lease purchase or subject to or wrap financing instead of trying to sell it traditionally? Or maybe you might buy it traditionally. It depends on the deal. But this is the compelling reason, is dealing directly with the seller. Okay, so that's why we're going to focus some time here on how to go through Craigslist and find these deals. All right, let's go over some of the Craigslist basics. So Craigslist is basically classified ads. It largely replaced newspaper classified ads as people started going and using the internet. They didn't want to pay for classified ads in newspapers, so they go to Craigslist. Craigslist is primarily free. There are a couple of sections where you have to pay to post an ad. A couple cities have, I believe there are a couple cities that have paid ad posting for the job section. And there may even be a paid section in a very small number of cities in the for rent section in order to post a property for rent. But the overwhelming majority of these are going to be free, and they're free to view. So Craigslist is primarily a free website in order to view classified ads, and we're going to talk about how to go into a particular category, the real estate for sale section, and reply to people that are posting their classified ads trying to sell their property. In case you're wondering, why we focus on Craigslist and not some of these other classified ad websites, this is for those that are looking at the screen. This is an Alexa traffic rank for Craigslist compared to the other two big competitors right now, which is Backpage and eBay Classifieds. You could see that Craigslist has a ton more traffic than Backpage and eBay Classifieds, and this is a logarithmic scale, meaning that it's even more profound if you were to do it on a normal linear scale. So the thing you need to take from this slide, especially if you're not watching this, is that Craigslist is by far the biggest traffic generator, and so it's the reason why most people go there, and it's the one you want to focus on. You could go to Backpage and eBay Classifieds and your local real estate for sale site, and there's other for sale by owner type websites, and also go through and do similar responses on those, but we're talking primarily about Craigslist because it's so dominant. So the last slide was a picture of traffic. This is page view, so the number of pages that have been viewed. You can see Craigslist is also by far the largest page view traffic place from Alexa data. So if you're looking at the chart, you're watching the video, you can see that. If you're just kind of listening by audio, just realize that Craigslist has a huge amount of traffic compared to the other ones. Okay, so what I'm going to be covering here in this presentation is basically one of the checklists I have on my real estate investor systems. You can access some of the systems on jamesorr.com. There's also a book you can get if you want to, Real Estate Investing Systems on Amazon. I think it's like $20, and it's got a good number of systems. I'm not sure if it has this one or not. But basically, it is the it's the Contact Craigslist for Sale by Owner ad checklist, and it is under the Real Estate Investor Marketing to Buy checklist. So when you're doing your marketing in order to buy properties, one of the sub checklists on there is contacting Craigslist for Sale by Owner ads checklist. So you use this checklist to basically go through all the for sale by owner ads and inquire about the ones that look interesting to you. That's what this checklist really is all about, and that's what we're going to be covering today on how to do this. So the question always comes up whenever I talk about replying to ads on Craigslist. Why don't we just go ahead and just email all of the ads on there and ask them if they'd consider owner financing, or ask them if they'd accept half of what they're got the property listed for if you're trying to buy for cash. Why don't you just go ahead and blast out either via email or text blasting if they've got telephone numbers on there? Why don't we just do that? Well, the reason why is that the overwhelming number of properties that are on Craigslist are not going to meet your criteria. So you're going to want to go and sift and sort through to be just the ones that you want to do. And you're saying, well, it doesn't matter. Why don't I just go ahead and email out them or text blast out these messages to people, and then I'll sift and sort when they reply back, because a lot of these people are not going to reply anyway, right? So why don't I just spam them all? Well, because if you do that, you're going to have your email blocked by Craigslist, and they're going to stop delivering the emails on the legitimate ones that you want to get through to, because they do not want people just to go ahead and contact every single person on Craigslist. In fact, there were people at one point in time trying to gather up email addresses. They'd write software or buy software that actually would go and grab every email address that was posted on Craigslist, and then they would try to spam those guys with messages for Viagra and all sorts of business opportunity stuff. So they've actually started to add filters in place where if you are emailing a certain number of people, and I have no idea what the number is, but just be reasonable about your replies. But if you're emailing basically every ad that's listed on there, you will at some point have Craigslist say, we're not even going to deliver your email anymore. We're just going to block them. So don't bother doing it. And they won't tell you that. They'll just stop delivering them. And you'll never know that your response rate is going to zero and that no one's replying to you anymore. So don't do it. And by the way, there's laws against this. Can spam. You're not supposed to have unsolicited commercial email, UCE, sent to people. So you want to be really careful about doing this. So we only want to inquire about the ones that are interesting to us. So we do a little bit of work up front in order to find the properties that look interesting. Then we reach out, make contact, and usually ask a couple questions about the property, and then we usually go and meet with them at the property if we are still interested after having an initial discussion. You could also call. Now, if you're going to physically pick up the phone and call people, yeah, much less likely that you're going to be found out about that you're spamming them, because Craigslist is not going to track the calls, at least yet. But they will go ahead and track emails being sent to people, because a lot of the people on Craigslist are going to be using the Craigslist anonymous email address, which goes through Craigslist system, and they could track how many people are emailing that particular ad. Okay, so don't spam sellers on Craigslist. Really go through and pick out the ones that are interesting to you. And it could be a good number of them, but you don't want to just do every single one. You only want to do the ones that are interesting to you. All right, so another question that comes up when we start talking about inquiring about ads on Craigslist is, how much do you ask on the phone if you're trying to do these creative transactions versus going out and visiting the houses? So it kind of opens up this conversation I usually have about like the hierarchy of communication. It is better for you to physically go out and meet with sellers. You'll do more deals. Okay, getting face-to-face with a seller, especially if you're doing something creative, you're more likely to be able to build rapport and find out more about what's really going on with the seller, discover what's going to be a win-win transaction for both you and the seller, and work out something that is going to be a win-win for both of you if you get face-to-face. If you can't get face-to-face, the next best thing is probably like a video chat where you can actually see the seller, you can have a conversation with them, they can see you, they can see your sincerity. The next best one after that, which is impractical in most cases, by the way, but the next best one is probably telephone. The next one after that is probably direct mail. Then probably email, then probably text messaging. Okay, so that's kind of my general hierarchy of ways to communicate with people, sellers specifically in this case, is that order. So then you ask yourself, well, should I go ahead and negotiate as much of the deal as possible to save myself the time of going out and seeing properties where they might not be willing to do it? Should I ask them up front, would you do owner financing? Would you do a lease option, lease purchase? And it really is up to you. I will tell you that the more houses you physically go out and see and get face-to-face, the more deals you're going to get. Because some sellers would say no up front if you asked them on the telephone before you went out there. But had you gone out and met with them, they would have been more reluctant to do it, but they might have actually said yes. Because you've finally gone out there, you've built rapport, you've been face-to-face, you've had some time to develop a relationship with them, and they feel more comfortable with you, and after feeling more comfortable with you, they have a harder time saying no to something that seems reasonable. So if it really does meet their needs, and it seems reasonable to them after they've had some time to warm up to you, then it could be a possibility of them saying, yeah, I would consider that. For you, I wouldn't have otherwise, but I like you, you seem like a nice guy or girl, and yeah, I could see doing that. So if you can get out there and physically do it, it's going to significantly increase the number of transactions you're doing, but it's also going to take a lot more time. It's a lot easier to drop an email and say, would you consider owner financing? And a small percentage are going to say yes, but it's more effective, more efficient. Not necessarily more effective. There's a difference. So if you can, go visit. You'll invest more time, and you'll end up doing more deals by going out there and visiting. But there's this fine balance of how much to pre-screen in advance. So the general rule of thumb about whether or not you should try to do it on the phone or if you should try to do it in person is if there is enough equity in the property where if they were properly motivated, they could accept your offer, then you should actually go to the property. That is the general rule of thumb. That's what you're supposed to do. As a real estate investor, if they could accept your offer, if they owe low enough that they could accept whatever your offer is, then you should go. You should take the time to build rapport and get out there and look at the house and see if they'd accept it. And by the way, they may not accept it up front, but they may keep their house on the market for another month or two and then decide that after a month or two they've changed their mind, they're going to come back to you and they're going to accept your offer. That happens more often than you'd imagine. Okay, so go visit the houses when you possibly can. All right, so one of the ways to go through ads on Craigslist, I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute, is you could go directly to Craigslist, go to the category you want to do, and just start going through each ad one at a time, opening it up, reading the ad, deciding whether or not you want to reply, and try to do it that way and keep track of it. I don't recommend that. Okay, I recommend you actually subscribe to the category on Craigslist that you're interested in. This is going to be the for sale by owner category, and you use a RSS, Real Simple Syndication Reader, RSS Reader like Google Reader in order to go and have the content organized for you in the reader. That way you can check off which ones you've read, which ones you have not read. That way when you come back tomorrow, you know where you stopped and where you started. You can see which ones you replied to. You can see which ones you're not interested in, and you can kind of keep track of it all. That's why I recommend you use an RSS Reader. It is really for your convenience. Yes, it takes a little bit of work to set it up. Yes, it takes a little bit of work in order to mark the ones you've read and tag the ones that you're interested in. But I think personally it's worth doing so that you can stay organized and know which ones you've done and which ones you haven't done and keep on top of all this. You could definitely just go in the category and start replying to ads. Definitely can. But I prefer using an RSS Reader. They're free. You can go to Google Reader. Just do a search in Google for Google Reader, and you'll be able to go set up an RSS feed. I'm going to walk you through some of the setup for that today on how to do it. So to recap, using an RSS Reader allows you to mark the ads that you've gone through and read already as read, so you can easily see what you've read and what you haven't since your last visit. You can also organize the ads. You can tag them as interested, pass, fixer-upper, owner financing, or whatever else you want to use in order to keep track of which ones and why you're interested in it. So if you're looking for lease options, and you find people that would be good candidates for lease options or that say they would do lease option, you could tag them in your RSS Reader as lease option. Then, if you wanted to, you could go back and say, okay, show me all the ads that I've tagged as in my RSS Reader as lease option, and you could follow up with all the guys that maybe didn't reply back the first time, or you could find guys that did reply back to go read their original ad. So if you didn't do that, it's going to be a lot harder for you to go find these ads again and to kind of keep track and stay on top and follow up with the ones that you want to do. So I strongly recommend using an RSS Reader, and I'm going to walk you through how to set one up here in a second, which is the next slide. So how to subscribe to RSS. So number one step, you load up Craigslist.com, go to the city that you're in, click on the real estate for sale. If you happen to be watching the video, I have an arrow pointing to that link. It is shown in the image. If you're not on there, it's like sort of in the middle section under housing, if they haven't changed their design since I made this. And so you go click on real estate for sale. Then that is going to pop up a page that shows the results for all the real estate that's currently for sale. You want to click on the link at the top of the page that says buy owner. Remember, we're not focusing on buy broker. Buy broker is the MLS, properties that are for sale by a real estate broker. And so your real estate agent should be covering the MLS for you. If you're not, you should get an agent to cover that for you. So you don't need to go and sort through all of them. You just want to do buy owner. It'll eliminate all the other stuff. If you wanted to do both, you could, but I'm going to focus here on and assume that you're just doing for sale by owner. So go ahead and click on buy owner, and that is going to show you a huge list of properties. And I've shown this this image where it's a very long page, and I have an arrow pointing to the very bottom of the page, which is where you'll find the link to subscribe to the page via RSS for your RSS Reader. So I'm going to zoom in now and show you what that link looks like, but it's all the way at the bottom on the lower right, unless they've changed their design since I've done this 2 days ago. Then at the bottom of the page, you'll see this like orange RSS box logo for Real Simple Syndication. If you click on that, depending on how you have your RSS Reader set up in your web browser, oftentimes it will ask you if you want to subscribe to it. In some cases, you may need to copy and paste that address and into your RSS Reader and set it up. But basically that link is the link for this particular category on Craigslist. So you'll be subscribing to the for sale by owner section of ads on Craigslist, and then anytime someone posts a new ad to Craigslist, it'll appear in your RSS feed in your RSS Reader, like Google Reader, which is what I'm going to show you how to set up. So this is a picture of, if you're watching the video, it's a picture of the RSS Reader Google Reader. So it's showing you my account on Google Reader, and you'll see that on the left-hand side I've got a section for Craigslist. You can kind of click on different Craigslist sections. I have also set up real estate for sale by owner, real estate services, real estate by broker, and the for rent section. So I've got like 4 categories on my local Craigslist that I can kind of read ads for. But if you're in that category, it'll show you all the ads on the right-hand side that are posted on Craigslist. Now, this is actually better than going on Craigslist directly, because if you're on Craigslist, normally, just a regular website, it just shows you a list of all the different ad titles. In order to see what's written in the ad, you have to click through to each ad to read it. With an RSS Reader, it shows you the headline, also shows you a little snippet of what's actually in the ad. So much more effective, easier way for you to read through these ads and kind of process them. And I'm going to walk you through a system for keeping track of these ads and how we work through them as well here in a second. Okay, so we're going to process through each ad from our Google Reader. And the first thing is, if you're not interested in the property, and this is going to be a large number of them, if you're not interested in the property, what I do is I mark each one that I'm not interested in with a tag of pass. Pass to me means pass on the property. I'm not interested. Okay, so when I'm going through the Google Reader, what I do is I look at the ad, and then I use the keyboard shortcut for tagging. So a tag is a way for you to kind of mark a word that describes that particular ad that you're on. And so what I do is I use the keyboard shortcut, which is T for tag. So I hit T, then I type in the word pass, then I tab to the save button, and I hit enter. So it may sound complicated, but it's really easy. Just hit T, T, then you go and you tab right the word pass, P-A-S-S, then I tab and I hit save and I hit enter. And that actually tags that particular ad as pass, I'm not interested. Then I use the keyboard shortcut J to move to the next ad. So the keyboard shortcut to move to the next ad is J. So basically, if I'm not interested in a particular ad, I kind of read through it. I'm not interested in this. T, pass, tab, enter, J to move on to the next one. Okay, you could use your mouse and do it, but I'm a big keyboard guy, so I try to use the keyboard as much as possible in order to speed up my ability to process through these, and I'm just walking you through how I do it. Do you want to set up your own system and do it that way? Great. I'm just sharing you what works for me in case you wondered how I do these when I do them, and I don't do them all the time because I focus mostly on my stuff inside the MLS. But basically, this is how I do it when I go through and I process ads on Craigslist. So pass, go on to the next one if I'm not interested. If I am interested, then I want to go and I want to look at the ad on Craigslist. So before this, I'm just looking at the ad. If it's something that's not a good fit for me at all, I know it's not in my criteria, then I'll pass on it. But if it does look interesting, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut V as in Victor in order to go view the ad, or V as in view. So use the keyboard shortcut V in order to view the ad directly on Craigslist. And then, does it meet my criteria? Once I go and I look at the ad in there, I'm really looking hard at it to see if it meets my criteria for what I'm looking for. So let's talk a little bit about some of the criteria you might use in order to find these particular types of ads. So what are you looking for in the ad? Well, it really depends on what you're trying to buy. If you're looking for positive cash flow, well, then you're going to need to do some type of quick calculation for net operating income, cap rate, or cash on cash, or you could use some rough rules of thumb. So if you know in your market that you need to have rents of about 1% of the purchase price, you can use that as a really rough guide to see if this is something worth pursuing or if it's way off. You know, if it's like 0.5%, well, then you know that the income on the property, the rent you're going to get, is way under what it needs to be in order to have it be a positive cash flow type property. So you can use rules of thumb. Be careful about rules of thumb in general, but you could also go and just calculate out net operating income or cap rate or cash on cash for that particular property, and then decide if it's something you want to pursue or not. If you're looking to buy, fix up, and resell, you might be doing a quick assessment of value and then looking for ways for you to add value. So in a presentation I did a couple months ago, I talked about how to find properties with at least $30,000 in profit by looking at the assessed value and comparing it to the address. So if you're looking for buy, fix up, and resell properties in Craigslist, you could go and say, okay, this is 1234 Main Street. Go open up the county record website and look up what the assessed value is on there. Determine what the assessed value is, see what they're asking, see if there's a big enough difference for you to be interested, and if there is, then you go ahead and contact them. If there's not, you pass unless you can find another way to add value that you can significantly increase the value of that property and make it a deal for you. So these are types of the assessments that you're doing in order to determine if you're interested in contacting the seller or not. Maybe you're looking for owner financing. If you're looking for owner financing, you may want to see if they own the property free and clear. So you can go look up, if you've got access to Real List, you can go look up what their financing situation is on the particular property and find out if they own it free and clear. If they don't own it free and clear, but they owe a lower balance, maybe you want to consider wrap financing. So contacting them about how you might structure wrap financing. Or if you're looking for some other type of creative financing like lease option, lease purchase, or subject to, you may be looking for signs of motivation. Okay, so this is what you're kind of looking for in the ad to determine, should I be contacting them? And if you cannot find a really good reason to contact them, it's up to you as to whether you want to default to contact them or to default and say, I'm not going to contact them. But you need to have a email covering the situation. I'm going to talk about email templates here in a second, or a way for you to kind of see if there's an interest in the particular property for you. So a way for you to say something to initiate a conversation. Okay, so that's what you're looking for in the ad. So for each one that you are interested in, if you say, okay, yeah, this kind of meets my criteria, then you want to check to see if you've contacted them before. Because if you start processing a large number of these, sometimes you will be contacting the same property because someone posted the ad multiple times. So you want to see if you've contacted them before. So what I do is every person I contact, I add them to my contact management database. So I check my contact management database to see if I have that person's name in there, the person's address, which is probably the most common way, because a lot of people are not going to be posting their name, but they're going to be posting their property as 1234 Main Street, and if they advertise it over and over again, then you're going to be able to go look up, okay, did I have in my contact database someone with the address 1234 Main Street? And that's primarily how I search. And then the last one is phone number. Most of the time you're not going to have email, because you're going to use the anonymous email address on Craigslist. So the anonymous email address changes for every ad, and you're not going to be able to find someone with the same email address. So you're not going to be able to look it up by email, but you can do name search, address search, or phone number search. If people are posting their phone number in there, you can do a search in order to see if you found them and if you've contacted them. It just saves you from reaching out to somebody and saying similar things to them when you've already contacted them. Okay, but if you do see them on there, it could trigger for you to follow up and send a different email. So if you go in there and you find out, oh, wait, I contacted this person before 2 weeks ago or a month ago, you may be able to follow up and say, oh, Johnny, I noticed you still had your property for sale again. Have you had a chance to reconsider my offer? Or maybe we should talk about ways that I could buy it or whatever. And you can kind of follow up with them that way. So if you're interested, you check to see if you've contacted them. The next step is, do you have a seller property information file put together already? Seller property information file, for those that are not familiar with it, is my way of researching a property. So it's all the documents you need in order to thoroughly research a property, and I have a whole list of things that go in there. So you go and you do the research on the property. Do you have one put together? If you don't, you may want to put one together. Then, if you decide you haven't contacted them before, you kind of put together your property information file. You go ahead and tag the ad on your Google Reader as interested. So use the T key in order to set up your shortcut, type in the word interested, and then you decide how you want to follow up. Do you want to make a phone call? Do you want to drop an email? Do you want to text them? What do you want to do in order to reach out to them? I kind of talked a little bit earlier about the hierarchy of effectiveness, kind of which order you should go into if time were not an option, or if time were not an issue at all. And so you can do that. What I'm going to primarily focus on for the rest of the presentation is some sample email replies of how you might go ahead and reach out to somebody. You don't have to use mine. In fact, I recommend that you do not use mine verbatim, but you can kind of use them as a model as to ideas on how to reach out and talk to somebody that has an ad post on Craigslist for sale by owner. All right, so when I go and I reply to somebody, I'm primarily doing email. Okay, I can call them, especially if the property looks really interesting, if it's like my top tier and I'm really excited about it. But most of the time, I'm going to just initiate the conversation. If it looks mildly interesting at all, I'm going to send them a quick email, and I'll show you what those emails are in a second. But then I'm using auto hotkey in order to do email templates. Rather than trying to rewrite each email individually, I've got a couple templates I use, and I can determine which variation for using auto hotkey. Auto hotkey is a way for you to type a small phrase, and then that expands out into a full email. So example, on my computer, if I want to type an email on rent to own, I'll type in RTO1, and then I'll hit space, and that actually sends up and kind of replaces RTO1 with a fully fleshed out email asking someone if they consider a rent to own. And the reason I do 1 is I've got a couple variations of that. So RTO1 is my email about would you consider a rent to own version 1. RTO2 is version 2. RTO3 is version 3. And so I have 4 or 5 versions. I don't even know how many I have. But I basically go through and I'll do RTO1, and it will expand out a full-length email about I saw your ad on Craigslist. Would you consider rent to own? And so you can set up all these different email templates or shortcuts on your own computer using AutoHotkey. That's the software that does it. It's a free download. You can get it at autohotkey.com, AutoHotkey.com. And it does a whole bunch of other things, but that's one of the things I use AutoHotkey for. So set up AutoHotkey, put your email templates in there. That way you don't have to retype these things or copy and paste them from 6 different text files, the emails you want to do on there, and it makes going through and doing these a lot faster. So go ahead and I recommend go ahead and setting that up. All right, so let's talk about sample replies. So what I recommend you do is write your own for your own style and personality. I can say certain things because that's my personality and it really fits kind of how I come across, but you may not be able to say the same thing that I say. So go ahead and adapt kind of what I'm giving you here as models and be yourself. So change them up. Maybe you want to do some manual emails yourself, the first few ones, until you get a feel for how you want to make your template, and then go ahead and make your own from some emails that you've sent and modify those. So you may want to go ahead and significantly alter from what I'm doing, but I'm going to show you some of mine so you can get a feel of how I do this. Then go ahead and add those templates once you get yours set up with your own personality, your own style. Add those to AutoHotkey so you don't have to retype them every single time. And so there are 2 major groups of replies that I've kind of set up when I'm doing this. Number 1 is where the address has been provided by the seller. And then oddly enough, in some areas and some ads, the seller does not include the address of the property. Drives me crazy because you're trying to sell real estate and you probably want to have the address in there. But sometimes they don't for whatever reason. So 2 major groups are address provided by the seller and then the address is not provided by the seller. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here. All right, so for those of you that are looking at the screen, you can kind of read through this. I will read through it for those that are listening on audio, but this is probably one of those things where if you're going to go and do it yourself, you can come on here and read the screen, watch the video. For those of you that are listening to the video and trying to jump ahead to this section, we're at 50 minutes, 52 seconds on the recording as of right now, so hopefully that'll help you. You can jump right to that spot on YouTube. All right, so here's the sample of an email. I was emailing you about this 3-2 property that you have for sale and listed on Craigslist. I was writing some numbers on it to see if it would be a good cash purchase for me as an investment property to rent out. I'm having some challenges having the numbers work for me, and I wanted to ask a couple questions that might help. Number 1, is there anything about the property that was not in your description that would increase the income rent on it more than a typical 3-2 in that area? 3-2 is 3-bedroom, 2-bath. 2, if the numbers for an all-cash purchase do not work, would you even be in a position where you might be willing to accept payments for your equity if I gave you a chunk of cash down? I look forward to hearing back from you soon. And then, of course, I have my normal signature line in my email that says Sincerely James, and it's got my address and telephone number. So that is a sample reply to someone who has an ad, and they've provided their address. So you'll notice I didn't have to reference the address that was missing or anything like that. And it basically asked them, is there any way I could get more than the rent that I'm just assuming I can get for the property? And number 2, would you consider owner financing? That's my nice way of asking them if they would even be remotely interested. And I've softened up the language. Instead of saying, would you do owner financing? I'm saying, if the numbers for an all-cash purchase do not work, would you even be in a position where you might be willing to accept payments for your equity if I gave you a chunk of cash down? That's my soft way of asking them if they consider owner financing. If you're not trying to go for owner financing, you don't need to include that. Okay. I actually asked them if there's anything about the property they didn't include in their description that would increase the income rent, because a lot of people are not selling their property as an income property. They're selling it to an owner-occupant, and they may know about something about the property that would actually be beneficial for the income and rent, or they have an opportunity to say, no, it's pretty much a normal 3-2, or they may be able to tell you, yeah, we had it rented out before, and we were getting this. It just opens up that conversation about that, and it really is what I'm looking to do. It's why I'm acquiring the property, so I kind of have that on there. Let's take a look at another example. So here's another alternative. I've set up an AutoHotkey as a variation. I was running some numbers on the property you're offering for sale. Oh, let me interject for a second. There's a reason I have multiple versions, and that is that you don't want to send the same exact email message to your seller through Craigslist over and over again. You don't want to have, tell me more about this property, because Craigslist will flag those and consider them spam. So there's a reason I have variations. There's a reason I have multiple copies and different things I'm saying to different people, and I'm filling in the blanks with different numbers that are unique to that property, because I want the seller to know, listen, I've really read your ad. I know that it's $189,000. I know it's a 4-bedroom property, and I know that it's located on the northeast part of town. You know, in some cases I have stuff like that in there, and so I am actually going through and customizing them and making them unique so that my emails get through, and that I don't get flagged by Craigslist as I'm spamming people, because I'm only inquiring about the properties I'm really interested in, and I'm customizing the emails. I can use templates to make it a little easier for me, but I'm not sending the exact same template every single time. I'm varying it up, and I'm customizing the content in there. Okay. So I'll read the ad again. I was writing some numbers on the property you're offering for sale to see if it would make a good property for me to buy for cash as an investment. I'm not having good luck getting the numbers to work at the $189,000, it doesn't say price, but implies it, that you are asking, and what I'm using for my rent income assumption. Number 1, is there anything about this property that would give it higher than normal rent for a 4-bedroom in that part of town? 2, would you be in a position to accept payments for your equity for a period of time if I put a chunk down to help make the numbers work? Thanks in advance. And so that's a very similar structure to the last email, but worded slightly different. It's basically the same type of email. So that's another variation. That's where they provided the address. All right, here's another one. I was interested in the property you have for sale on Craigslist, and I was running some numbers on it for buying it all cash as another investment property. I'm having some challenges making the numbers work as a 2-2 at $168,000.5K. So I have some questions for you. Number 1, what is the actual HOA cost per what time period, monthly, quarterly, yearly? Question mark. Number 2, is there anything special beyond what you wrote in your ad that would make the income/rent for this property to be more than a similarly described 2-bed, 2-bath? Number 3, if I cannot get the numbers to work for an all-cash offer, would you be in a position to be able to accept payments for your equity with a chunk of cash as a down payment? I'm looking forward to hearing back from you soon. Okay, so that's variation number 3 where the address was provided. If you've got questions about stuff, how old's the roof? Is the from the pictures it looked like it's a 2-car garage. Is it a 2-car garage? If you can ask something else, that's another way for you to kind of inquire about the property and get additional information. You're trying to initiate a conversation you're having with the seller, and then you can start talking to them to find out more about the property, and then eventually make your offer by going out there and doing it. But you're not going out there, in my opinion, and saying up front, would you accept half price for your property? Okay, that is not going to be a good strategy for you in most cases. All right, here's another sample with no address. I was emailing you about the 3-2 property they have for sale and listed on Craigslist. I was running some numbers on it to see if it would be a good cash purchase for me as an investment property to rent out. I'm having some challenges having the numbers work for me and wanted to ask a couple questions that might help. As an aside, you notice a theme here about not having the numbers work? That's because most properties, the numbers don't work. You know, the overwhelming majority of properties you analyze, the numbers just don't work. They are not a strong investment. That's why you got to push through, especially in the MLS, you got to push through 95 properties in order to find 5 that really look interesting. And then of those 5, you may only find 1 or 2 that really are worth pursuing. So most of the time when I look at these numbers, I'm like, it's a 3-2, rent on it's $1,200, and they're asking $250,000. Okay, well those numbers don't work. It's hard to make those numbers compelling as an investment. So I'm trying to reach out and see if there's something else about it. And if I can't get the numbers to work with traditional financing, then owner financing, I may be able to get the numbers to work if I do it that way, which is the kind of context of this email. So this is an example of no address, and I think I just read that there. See if it would be a good purchase as investment property. I'm having some challenges having numbers work for me. I wanted to ask a couple questions that might help. Number 1, first I noticed you didn't include the actual property address. If you could let me know what that is, I can refine my numbers a little more. So that's because they didn't put their address in there. Number 2, is there anything about the property that was not in your description that would increase the income rent on it more than a typical 3-2 in that area? Number 3, if the numbers for an all-cash purchase do not work, would you even be in a position where you might be willing to accept payments for your equity if I gave you a chunk of cash down? Thank you in advance. I look forward to hearing back from you soon as I am interested. Okay, so that's another one where there's no address. As I read through this, I'm reminded there's a lot of psychology that goes into kind of formatting these emails. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about it right now, but there are reasons why we're saying if the numbers for an all-cash purchase do not work. I'm also asking them if they'll accept payments for their equity if I gave them a chunk of cash down. I mean, there's reasons why I'm phrasing things that way, and maybe I'll make another video at some point about the psychology of wording some of these things. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the presentation. Those are the kind of email samples to use. You should be able to go log into Craigslist. Well, actually, you don't need to log in, but go to Craigslist, go to the category, set up your RSS feeder, RSS read for Google Reader, and kind of start going through the ads. You now have some sample email templates to use. You know how to set up auto hotkey. So you should understand how to go and do this and find some deals that way using Craigslist. I will be at the meeting tonight live to answer any questions you have about this particular topic. Or if you catch me at a later meeting and you got a quick question about this, you've seen this video late, you're welcome to go ahead and ask me questions about that as well. So you're welcome to go to jamesorr.com/gift for the world's greatest free gift offer, and you can get some more information about that on there. It's got some tools and resources for you. You can go ahead and take advantage of that. And that's it. If you do need to contact me, there's my contact information on the screen. Again, my name is James Orr, James. Last name spelled ORR. Direct telephone number 970-225-6989. You can also go to my website, jamesorr.com. It's got some great resources for investors and people looking to buy or sell property in northern Colorado on there. So, hope you enjoyed this presentation. This has been James Orr, and I will talk to you guys tonight, hopefully, or at a future meeting. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.